Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Dear students, Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the course of Academic Reading and Writing. The topic for today's class is Structural Reading. I'm your teacher, Muhammad Asif Khan, Lecturer, Department of English, Kohat University of Science and Technology. Discussion agenda for today's class is that first of all, I will introduce the concept of structural reading and I will define that how it is a form of close reading applied to the overall structure of an extended text. After this introduction, I will tell you that how we can read a sentence or how we can read a paragraph and how we can read a textbook structurally. So this is the whole discussion for today's class, and now we are going to start with introduction. Basically, structural reading is a form of close reading that is applied to the overall structure of an extended text. Like usually we see that we are studying a book that is an extended text. And when we read that very text that is basically an extended text, we have to apply the strategy of structural reading. And that is basically a form of close reading. So in structural reading, we focus on what we can learn from the textbook. And this we do by studying its title, its preface, introduction, and table of contents. When we look at these very things, it gives us two basic things. The first thing is that it enables us to evaluate this very thing, that how this book is useful to us. And it helps us and it enables us to evaluate a book to determine whether we want to read this very book carefully or not. And the second use of structural reading is that it provides an overview to use this structural reading as a scaffolding in reading the text. So if we can get a basic idea of what a book is driving at before we read it in detail, we are much better able to make sense of the parts of it as we read them paragraph by paragraph. So knowledge of whole helps us understand all its parts. And knowledge of parts helps us better understand the whole. And this whole contains all the parts. So these things are interrelated. Studying the parts helps us understand the whole. And studying about the whole of that very thing helps us to better understand the parts of that very structure. So structural reading is a form of close reading that we normally apply to the structure of a long extended text. To read structurally, we should ask these very questions. These questions are very helpful in understanding the structure of a text. What does this title tells me about this book? Or we can ask another question like, what is the main idea in the book? So you should be able to figure out from skimming the introduction, preface and the first chapter that what is the main idea in this book. And it will be very easy for you to determine whether you want to read that very text carefully or not. So you should ask such type of questions. One another important question may be that what are the parts of the whole and how does the book deals with those parts. This may be found in an overview in the introduction, preface, first chapter and the table of contents. You should note down that in the light of your structural reading, what question would I pursue during close reading? So when you have the knowledge about the main idea, it will be very easy for you to know this very thing, that what are the questions which I should focus during my close reading. So structural reading helps you to determine the questions that you have to pursue during your close reading. Now we are going to start that how should we read a sentence. So first of all, reading a sentence consists in finding a way to state what the sentence says. So we can find the thought the sentence expresses. Further ways to make the meaning of sentences clear are elaborating the sentences, finding an example in the real life that connects to the idea of that very sentence. And then we should illustrate the meanings of that very sentence. When you practice that very thing, and we already discussed different strategies in the lecture of close reading, that how can we find the meanings of a sentence and how we can elaborate the meanings of that very sentence. So that is very important to find a way to state what the sentence says, so we can think the thought of the sentence that is being expressed in that very statement. So finding key sentences means finding the sentences that are driving force within a book. Structural reading is one way by which we locate key paragraphs and then we boil them down to key sentences and then to the key ideas and key questions. So if you have the knowledge of the key ideas that are being discussed in that book, and you know that what are the questions which I am looking in this very reading, and what are the key sentences, and you are able to locate the key paragraphs within that structure, it will be very easy for you to know the ideas that are the driving force within that book. So it is very necessary and it is very important part of reading with discipline that we should connect sentences to the broader context. Studying sentences in isolation does not give us that knowledge which is resulting into the understanding of the complete structure. So if we connect sentences to that broader structure or that broader context within which they are located, within which they are written by the writer, then we will be able to see that how they fit within the written piece. So it is very important in the structural reading that we should connect the ideas within individual sentences to the broader structure of the text. For every sentence you read, you might ask questions like, how does this sentence connect with the other sentences in the text? And how does this sentence relate to the organizing idea of this text as a whole? So if you are asking these questions and you are working on the answers of these questions, you get the idea that how this text is organized and what is the role of this individual sentence within this broader structure. So it is very important for the critical reader to read sentences in relationship to the other sentences. And it is very important for reading with discipline to connect each sentence with a purpose of the written piece. When you understand the main idea, when you understand the purpose of that written piece, then it helps you to read sentences in relation to the other sentences and you connect each sentence with purpose of the written piece. So taking a sentence out of the context it results into many problems, because sentences that we have read in isolation from the sentences that precede or that follow them often results into exaggeration, or we overstate a point. We know this very thing, that the sentences that precede or follow usually clarify the author's true meanings, or these very sentences bring it in line with supporting facts. Read a text generously. It is the responsibility of a good reader to look for the qualifications of the point that otherwise might seem false or overstated. So, connecting sentences with the main purpose and connecting the sentences to the broader structure within which these sentences are located, that is very important for a critical reader. So we should read sentences in this way, that we have the idea that how these sentences are connected with other sentences, and what is the relation of this very sentence to the organizing idea of this text, or to the purpose of the written piece, or to the broader context, or to the whole of this very structure. So this is very important during that process when we are reading a sentence. Next comes that how should we read a paragraph? Carefully reading a paragraph involves one or more of the tools discussed under close reading, which we already covered in our lecture. So these tools help us find the idea or the question that is actually the driving force within that paragraph. And if you know that what is the driving idea or what is the driving force within that paragraph, then it becomes very easy to understand that concept. When you get the main idea of a paragraph, it becomes very easy to identify the key paragraphs within that extended text. Finding key paragraphs consists of finding the ideas or questions that are driving force within that book. One paragraph has one main idea that is connecting all those sentences within that very paragraph. When you find out all the main paragraphs within any textbook, it means that you have found all the main ideas or the main questions that are the driving force within that text. Structural reading. You should remember this very thing, that structural reading is an important mean by which we can identify the key paragraphs within that extended text. So all paragraphs within a written piece should connect to every other paragraph. This is very necessary so that we can see the logical connection between the ideas. And all ideas should form a system of meaning. We know that every textbook presents a system of meaning. In the same way, every discipline, we already discussed this very topic, that how we can identify the system of meanings, or how every subject has distinct system of meaning. We already covered this very topic in the last lecture. But if you have that idea that this book is having a system of meaning, and you have the understanding of that system of meaning, it becomes very easy to grasp the main ideas, the main questions that are being raised within that book, and that are the driving force within that extended text. So this understanding of the key paragraphs of any text, and the understanding of a piece of literature, that how different paragraphs are connected with one another, and if you have that understanding to see the logical connection between the ideas, it gives you the understanding of system of meanings within that specific discipline or that specific subject. Or on micro level, it gives you the understanding of that specific textbook or extended text. So understanding that how an idea is being expressed within a sentence and how these sentences are connected with one another and what are the key paragraphs and what main ideas or main questions are being presented within those paragraphs and how these paragraphs are interconnected or interlinked logically, that is very important in understanding of system of meanings. As you move from one paragraph to another paragraph, a critical reader should ask this question, that what is the most important idea in this paragraph and how do the idea in the paragraph relate to the ideas in the previous paragraph and how are the important ideas in the text interconnected. A critical reader should look for paragraphs that focus on significant ideas or questions. And when he identify these significant ideas and questions, he should connect those ideas to situations and experiences that are meaningful in the life of that reader. And if that reader is actively connecting the ideas to the real lifetime situations, then he should ask that how can I relate this idea to something I already understand? And to connect the ideas to the real life situations and experiences, a critical reader should ask these questions, that how I can relate this idea to something I already understand. Is there an important idea here that I can use in my thinking? Or have I ever experienced a situation that sheds light on this idea? These questions are very important when we are reading a paragraph, because with these questions we become able to logically connect the different ideas within a text, and in the same way we are able to identify the driving force within that text. Now let's move one step ahead of that. If you know that how should we read a sentence or a paragraph, it becomes very easy to read a textbook. The first and the most important insight that is necessary for successfully reading a textbook is that all textbooks focus on the systems. And when we internalize those systems of meanings, it can help us reason through a specific set of problems. These very systems focus on a specific way of thinking about special set of things. To elaborate a history textbooks teach a specific way of thinking about events in the past. In the same way, biology textbooks teach a specific way of thinking about living things. When we study mathematics, the mathematics textbooks teach us specific way of thinking about numbers, shapes and figures. In the same way, physics textbooks teach a specific way of thinking about mass and energy and their interrelations. And this very concept is true for all other books. Literature textbooks teach a specific way of thinking about poetry, drama, novel and other forms of literature. So when you are able to understand the systems or the structures of meaning that are there within any specific area or any text, it becomes very easy for you to uncover or to get the insight of that very topic, that very subject or that very discipline. As I described to you that these very textbooks teach us a specific way within that discipline, we see that there is no way to learn mathematics from a maths textbook without learning how to figure out correct answers to mathematical questions and problems. And in the same way, there is no way to learn history from a history textbook without learning how to figure out correct and responsible answers to historical questions and problems. Any subject can therefore be understood as a system of figuring out correct or responsible answers to a certain set of questions. We study chemistry to understand chemicals and how they interact, to answer the questions about chemicals. We study psychology to figure out human behaviors, to answer questions about certain human problems. So all subjects can be understood in this way, and all textbooks can be read in this way that is being described to you now. We see that most of the textbooks begin with introductory chapters or preface that introduces us to the field of study, like what is biology, what is physics, what is history, or what is literature. So it is very important for a reader to do a close reading of this opening chapter in order to acquire from very beginning an insight into the most basic and fundamental concepts in the field. Once we have a basic idea of the whole of that subject from this very introductory chapter, we will be able to do something within the system. Understanding the basic ideas of the system, it becomes very easy to think within that very system. Thus, with the basic ideas of biology, we will be able to ask some basic biological questions, and we will be able to identify some relevant biological information. So this is crucial to success in reading the leftover textbook, because if we do not have a clear concept of the whole, we will not be able to relate the parts, and that parts are being covered by other chapters. And that makes that whole. So, very important to get the main ideas, to get the basic ideas of that system. For this, our reading strategy should not be whole, part. No, it's not the right strategy. We should do reading in whole part. We first ground ourselves in the basic ideas of the whole, and that we can do through study of the introduction, preface, and the first chapter. And then we should identify the main ideas of the whole. After we have identified the basic ideas of the whole, we should then relate each part, each subsequent chapter to that whole. We should understand the whole through integrating the parts into it. We should use the whole as our tool of synthesis. And in the end, we should use our knowledge of the parts as a tool of analysis. So when we use these very things for synthesis and analysis of the text, it means that we are close reading a piece of text. So that is the today's discussion, that structural reading is a form of close reading, and we apply structural reading to the overall structure of an extended text, and we see that how by understanding the basic ideas of any text, or how understanding the system of meanings of any discipline, we can grasp that extended material, or we can interact within any discipline. As I explained the concept to you, that once we have the basic ideas of the whole of a subject from the introductory chapter, we will be able to do some thinking within that system. it becomes easy for us to think within that system of meanings. So that is the whole discussion for this lecture. I hope that now you will be clear about structural reading, and you will have the ability to apply structural reading as a strategy of close reading. Thank you very much for listening passionately. Allah Hafiz.